I have viewers who they may not be able to leverage a line of equity in their home. They may not have a 401k to go into. What can these people do to help them get through these next couple of weeks and months, which are going to be awful?
Yes, they are. And we thought that there was going to be an extension of these benefits, right? I think that's what everyone was betting on. It doesn't look like that's going to happen at least for another week at least. So right now we need to be thinking about short-term goals. I'm hoping that some of those $600 were put into a savings account for some people, because we knew they were going to end eventually. But if not, what we want to focus on is really thinking about sort of cash, right? So we're in a cash crunch essentially. So budgeting is the first thing that we need to do. And this is not your traditional budgeting. What we're talking about is really slashing and downsizing your budget. One of the biggest costs is housing. I've talked to a lot of people who are leaving the cities and rethinking their housing situation because that's a huge cost for many people. So whether you can go to another sort of, maybe it's another state, possibly if you have relatives. I've seen a lot of cohabitating, and I think that's a really good idea right now if it's possible with COVID. In terms of also potentially getting roommates, if you can break a lease or if your lease is up, considering about downsizing your housing. So that's a big one. Then there's the other things that add up, right? Obviously, hopefully you've already ended any subscription services that you may have. You're not doing the takeout, right? I know it's really hard and this is the worst time, but right now we need to be saving dollars. You want to make sure that you don't have anything on automatic payment that shouldn't be there, right? So things that are coming out of your paycheck or coming out of your bank account, you want to review those. I always say that we like to have people do what we call a look back, a 1 month look back, which is basically download your credit cards, download your bank statements, and see how much you spent in the last month. That's going to help you identify if there's any sort of things that have been left on subscriptions, but especially in like Apple Pay, for example, those things get turned on. We forget to turn them off. The next thing is phone bills. So for example, a lot of people pay over $100 in their phone bill. I actually recently switched out to a sort of prepaid phone bill, just so I know that I can lower those costs. And at this point, 5G is pretty much what everyone's getting. It's not much different. So Altice, I know, has a couple of plans. So that's something, again, where can you cut the biggest costs that you have? So that's budgeting. Again, selling, there's obviously people are talking about selling things online. I'm not sure that people are doing a lot of buying though right now. So,
Right.
So I don't know if that is necessarily the best advice. The next thing we want to do, and again, this goes back to where can I identify places where I may possibly get cash or cover costs. So the next thing I want to talk about is credit, because credit is going to be a place where perhaps you can access some cash in an emergency situation. I don't like to always suggest that, but we are in dire times right now. So you want to be able to look at what your credit limits are. If you, for example, you can ask for a credit extension. If your credit is decent, you might be able to ask for an extension. That way, you know you have it there. I'm not saying you should be using it, but in case you need it, it is there. The other thing is take a look at your credit score and your credit report. Now is a great time to think about long-term goals in terms of credit. Your credit score report is free for another year. So that's something that people should know about, and it's online, and you can come to our site and get those resources. Your credit score generally is reported also for free in many of your cards. So if you have Capital One, for example, or Discover, your credit score is free there. There's also NerdWallet and other places that you can get that. So take a look at that. If you have a decent credit score and you feel like you need some more credit, you might be able to open up another credit card. Again, this is only for emergency. Right. It's emergency reserve essentially. As you mentioned, there are new rules around the 401k. Again, something that I wouldn't suggest doing in normal times, but now they're allowing people to take sort of money out of their 401k without the penalty, because normally there's a 10% penalty. If you are in a job and you have access to a 401k, ask your provider or your HR if you're able to take a loan Sometimes a loan is better than actually just the full withdrawal. And there's going to be an extension of a period of time to pay that back. So those, again, for people who have money in a 401k and also who are employed. So we're talking about a lot of people, though, are unemployed. So that's only for a particular group of folks. The next thing that we want to talk about are really accessing benefits. There is a number of programs out there. This is not the time to have any shame around accessing government benefits. So we talk about no shame in the money game, right? You've got food banks, you've got SNAP benefits, which are essentially food stamps. You got TANF, which is some additional cash assistance. Then there's also state and local programs. So get on the internet, figure out who's got what programs. A lot of the big nonprofits are also offering cash assistance grants. So there may be one-off $500 to $1,000 grants. And so you're going to have to look at your local area in the nonprofit sector to see if there's anyone that's doing that. But take advantage of the food banks. We talk to a lot of people who are providing services, and a lot of people say there's actually a lot of food in many of the food banks that people aren't taking advantage of that. So we want to make sure that people are taking advantage of those things. That's going to help you cut at least your food costs down for the short-term period. And then the next thing, and this is a sort of a long-term goal, but I think that it's really important for people to be thinking about, how do I get my next job? How do I get a job that's also permanent and that has a sort of either a pay increase, or that you are going to have sort of a long-term trajectory in terms of a career. And when you look around it, at sort of who's hiring, technology companies are where it's at. I mean, I happen to be in tech, and so I'm closer to it, but the service economy has changed dramatically. And for most people, their jobs are not going to come back, or they're not going to come back in the same way. Sure. And so what we're talking about is really upskilling, right? So how do you prepare yourself for the workforce that we're in right now, which is tech enabled? That could be.
I actually have somebody, a career coach, that I'm going to be speaking to as well, to do that component about looking
Awesome.
at jobs, remote jobs. If you have iffy credit and it's really because of COVID, maybe you were okay before, can you refinance your home? Or are they going to really look at your credit score? And
well, they're going to look at two things in refinancing. They're going to look at job stability. So if you don't have a job, that's going to be very hard. And they're also looking at your credit score, right? So now if your drop is from, let's say, 700 to maybe 690, that's not so bad, right? But if you've dropped from 690 to below, 650, it's going to be very hard for you to refinance right now. And even to take a second also, they're going to be looking at job security, I think is the biggest thing right now. So if you're unemployed, that it's probably not going to happen. You want to think about the short term and then getting your credit back up, right? So obviously people have been talking about having conversations with credit counselors and with your credit card companies. Make those minimum payments if you can. Student loans, I think, are still something where you can negotiate a little bit more time. So you want to do that. Also, if you are a homeowner, get on the phone with the mortgage company, make a good faith payment as much as you can. I think that's going to help people. And, look, all across the board, credit scores are going to take a hit. We know that. So I think right now we're at a point where, what is my short-term needs in terms of cash, and making sure that like my livelihood is taken care of immediately, and then preparing for that sort of next wave. Like, what does the future hold? Because the next year is also going to be very financially insecure.
Right. Is there anything I didn't ask that you want to add?
No, I would just say that I think it's really important to look at that when you're talking about the jobs searches and new jobs. There is a lot of new programs. Google just launched a new technical program that's they're offering free scholarships for. So I would say, in terms of careers, looking outside your normal box. The other point I would like to mention is that Dev Bootcamps. So there's a software developer bootcamps. They're 3-month programs, and they often have situations where you don't have to pay until until you get a job. So these are sort of non-traditional but future-looking type of jobs in technology that people don't often think about when they're thinking about career transitioning. So pivoting is really going to be an important part of this.
Boot camp. What is the boot camp?
They're called software developer boot camps. We call it Dev Boot Camp for short.
Wow, that's
And
awesome.
they're really 3 to 4 month programs, and it for people who are coming out of a traditional job and want to go into tech. And if you look around, that's what's hiring. There's always a job for you in tech. So we want to just push that, especially for people who were in the service industry before.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. Anything else?
I think that's it right now. The only other thing I would plug is that we have a lot of resources. We have a COVID financial survival guide. And so encourage people to go ahead and sign up for the newsletter, and you can get that, download that financial survival guide. And what we've included in there, and we'll be updating that as well, but what we've included are things around the rules for credit, rules around the 401k. So there's a lot of sort of things that we want to make sure people are doing it in the right way so that they're not getting harmed later on.
What about, one last question, what about medical expenses? You know, a lot of people now don't have coverage, or their bills are high and now their income's not.
Again, that, you know, going to the marketplace right now. I know I just helped someone who was, for example, on Cobra, and then Cobra is very expensive.
Right.
And I was like, look, you need to go to the marketplace to get a cheaper coverage plan. So downsizing in some ways your medical insurance plan is one way to do that. But that's, again, if you're already covered. If you're not going to that marketplace and getting some new coverage, you might actually qualify for Medicaid. So that's another thing. Again, this is not the time to be conservative. You really want to access all of those benefits. Now, if you have medical bills, I think this is a place where you're going to have to use your negotiation skills. There's no obligation. I think that's the important thing. There's no obligation on the part of any of these companies to give you a pass, right? So it's really about, hey, I've been paying, I want to pay, I'm making a good faith payment. So that's another thing, right? So being able to say, I can pay you $25, $50, but I can't make these huge payments right now. Could you not report my account as late? Right? Sometimes just asking, I know, look, and again, they have no obligation to do so, but they can not report that as being late, right?
Awesome. You were just wonderful. Thank you.